We have so many kids that are labeled like a behavior problem or ADD or ADHD. They can't be in my classroom. Well, yes, they can. And if you're more using visuals, take a picture of me doing this. This is what I look like doing what you're asking me to do. Clever.
Welcome to Toddle's School Leaders Project. On today's episode of the podcast, I'm joined by Peggy Campbell-Rush, and we're talking all about executive functioning. This is one of those buzzwords that I'd heard a lot about, and I wasn't quite sure what it meant. So when we're talking about executive functioning, we're really digging into the skills of learning. Peggy's great because she gives so many actionable examples and strategies that you can take and use in your classroom tomorrow. And she really highlights this through line of transitioning away from anger and frustration at our students and towards curiosity and meeting them exactly where they are. So without further ado, let's jump into this episode with Peggy Campbell-Rush. So Peggy, I first heard your name. At Toddle, we just started a group called the Academic Leaders Forum. So it's like a group for leaders in independent schools to come together and learn. And one of the issues that's come up again and again in that group is this idea of executive functioning. And your name came up as a really beautiful thought leader in that space. So might you give us a little bit of the foundations of what exactly is executive functioning? Why does it matter? Kind of the basics.
Yeah. So executive functioning, research is telling us that executive functioning skills usually cement themselves in early childhood and again in early adolescence. And also they're much more important than just academics alone. And if you go into like high schools right now, college counselors or whatever, the business world is looking for those people that have those executive functioning skills. And pretty much they are life skills, their organization. You're able to keep your supplies all together and know where they are, right? As simple as that. Cognitive flexibility. If something doesn't work, do you get really upset or do you just try again? Metacognition, thinking about your thinking, saying, oh, yeah, well, you know what? I think I could do this a little bit differently. Self-regulation, are you in control of yourself? Are you able to just say, yeah, okay, I can wait and I can do this again. Task initiation. Are you independent enough to just, say, move that just a little bit, to say that, okay, now I understand the directions. I'm going to get started. And if I have a question, I'll ask it, but I'm not just going to sit there and wait for the instructions to be given like several times. Paying attention. That's probably one of the biggest things is first time listening. And I'll tell you, social media is wrecking that. We have kids on screens, right? And even their parents are trying to talk to them and they're addicted to the screen and they can't listen, right? The first time. And so that becomes habitual. And so it parlays into school. Whereas, I don't really want to listen to you now. I would do my own thing. And then another big one is working memory. Are you able to grasp what you just learned and put it into practice and then, bring it into long-term memory, remember it the next day, employ it to learn something new. So that's another one. And then another big one, especially in early childhood, is emotional control. Do you have a breakdown every time you don't get your way? Are you having a fit because something didn't go right? So all those executive functioning skills really matter in life. Academics surely matters, but really when we think about it, if you don't have the rest of these, you're not a really well-rounded human being.
Right. Oh, you listed these off, and I'm wondering, do they come from one place? Is this a list that you've curated and collected, or like where do you turn to for finding this
Well,
information?
all you have to do is research executive function skills on the internet. Good research. I'm not talking about just fluff stuff, but they'll come from amazing sources. It could be Harvard, the Cleveland Clinic. All of these research-bound places will go through this whole comprehensive list of executive function because they're brain skills.
Okay. So based in kind of the neuroscience research, that's kind of where they're coming from.
Right.
Makes sense. I find it so interesting because we mentioned earlier, we're both in the international world, and I come from the IB. which has like a prescribed set of transdisciplinary skills called the approaches to learning. And one set of those skills are called self-management skills. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with those? Is there a lot of overlap there, or where might the similarities and differences
No,
be?
to me, I think there's an exact integration. I mean, these again are life skills. They're things that you must learn to be a productive member of society. And, in the IB schools, they are really translating exactly what executive functioning skills are into their core values.
Very cool. Okay, that's very helpful for me to understand that. So when you're seeing this done in schools, like is there work being done? Are people unpacking these into I can statements? Are they creating them across grade levels? What do they practically look like when they're
Well,
being
it's become so much tougher. Um, in today's world, it's like the curriculum pushed down. I'm talking about like back in the 1970s. Let's just talk about kindergarten, okay? If you got out of kindergarten and you recognized a lot of letters and you knew a couple sounds, you were like, whoop, whoop, good to go, man. You were like ready for first grade. Now you can't get out of pre-K 3 or pre-K 4 unless you have like a lot of those skills. Like we're worried about you. And so the tremendous curriculum push down has really said that academics almost are here and executive functioning skills are here. And
Mm,
really, because early childhood is when you really cement these in, executive functioning should be here and academics are here. Or we need to meet in the middle.
okay, so you're finding there's more of a focus on content coverage as opposed to kind of balanced disposition and skill
Yes, I mean, it's like
development.
you have to get through this much curriculum, during your full year in a certain grade. And
Mm.
if not, we're finding that we are referring children to a child study team or special needs committee or something like that, where really maturationally they
They're
probably
not
just
ready
need more
for that
time.
content
Yeah,
potentially.
yeah,
Yeah, we're
yeah.
seeing other models. You can look to Finlands of the world, and they're not even trying to start reading until age 7 and 8.
Right, right. And they're having great success. Now that's a smaller country and they're a little bit more united on their philosophies.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We should be looking at other models that are working.
There's such a tension I think that exists, and I think that is part of the beauty of being a private or independent school in the States is that you're not necessarily restricted by those same sets of meaty curriculum standards. I think they're a great guide, and we can parse those down and simplify and streamline them. Like, have you seen schools doing that work well?
Yes, especially in independent schools, international schools, because here's the thing: you have a clientele that you choose, right? I mean, you have a criteria of whether they're mission appropriate for your school or not. So that's a very nice thing, rather than public schools who take everybody. But also, they have the luxury of like that's what I do is teacher coaching, mentoring, now and across the U.S. And you can't teach a class you can't manage, right? So classroom management has to come first. And once you get that down, and sometimes I'll go in and I'll just make a couple suggestions, and the teacher will be like, "Oh, I used to do that and I forgot," or "Oh gosh, yeah, that seems so simple." Like these are not life changing things that you have to do to mold your classroom differently. It's just that you've got to be able to have these children pay attention, self regulate, have working memory, have emotional control. And we actually should be teaching that explicitly.
Mm,
Like this, like what do we do in classrooms 90% of the day? We talk, 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 talk. And auditory processing is not really cemented in little kids.
right.
Visual, kinesthetic, those are the things. So we need to model what does it look like to pay attention, sit up straight, really listen to the directions, and do. You see, if we model that more, we're explicitly teaching executive functioning skills.
Hmm. So, I mean, again, I guess does that come down to developing a continuum so I know which skills I'm responsible for explicitly teaching and assessing, or is it more instinctual based on the needs you see in your classroom? What's the best way to organize ourselves in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can pretty glaringly see if a child doesn't have working memory and you give directions, right? And they haven't paid attention to the directions because they're verbal rather than visual, then they're sitting there without task initiation because they're not getting started because they really didn't understand the directions and they don't remember what they just heard. You see, so all of these are really kind of tangled up. And
Okay.
you're going to be able to see that. And so then you're going to say, okay, let me work on that with this child.
So getting kind of more curious about the behaviors you're seeing in your class, and instead of assuming, oh, they're just being a bad kid, it's more what
Yes.
skills might they be missing, and
Yes.
how might I fill that gap?
We have so many kids that are labeled like a behavior problem or ADD or ADHD or, they can't be in my classroom. Well, yes, they can. And
Right.
if you're more using visuals, take a picture of me doing this. This is what I look like doing what you're asking me to do. I have kids that I do that with, and I'll have them on index cards so I can just show them at any time what that looks like, task initiation or whatever. And I show them a picture, and because they're the star, right, in the picture, it's auditory. They'll go, oh, yeah. And they
Oh,
get it. They get it. But if that old adage, what your mother said, if I told you once, I told you 1,000 times, to clean up your room, you
right.
know, stop talking. Use visuals. It's so powerful.
Makes me think like the Charlie Brown teacher.
That's exactly it. That's hilarious. That's a great model.
So
Because
for
really, a lot of kids. Okay, so let's talk about this too. Little kids can hear, process, and understand about 110 to 120 words a minute.
okay,
We as adults, we speak about 170 to 180 words a minute. So yes, it's want, want, want. I mean, your message could
yeah,
actually be. So my father used to say this. Your message, he's a great teacher, should fit on a cocktail napkin. That's
mm,
it. You should say as little as you can in the first 7 seconds to get your message across. Not like, hey, how are you doing today? I was wondering if you could sit down because we're going to start a project. No, you've
we're
lost the
already
kid.
yeah.
Very compassionately, it's sit, pencil, paper. Because and that's another thing is the brain loves threes, right? It loves chunking. So that's the reason that your phone number is three digits and four. Your credit card's 444 and three, right? It's
Mm.
the three bears, the three musketeers, the Trinity. All of that is because the brain loves chunking. So if we can do things in threes with less words, like stand up, door, line up, something as simple as that, you get it in. It's
Brain.
very specific. You get it in chunking and in the first 7 seconds.
Clever. Is it kind of, I know you're working on a book for this. So are you organizing it around a certain framework, or is it just more a kind of random list of skills that you kind of respond
Well,
to in your classroom? Or yeah, how are you thinking about it? Because you seem
so
really well
the books
versed
that
in it.
I write are really for teachers to be able to take off the shelf, say,
Okay.
I've got an issue. Let me go in and get an idea. So it
Oh,
takes
it's a
one of
glossary.
these, yeah, it takes each one of these skills, research based, of course, and then it gives you, okay, we've identified the what, which is so easy to do. You go on the internet, you read about, but it doesn't tell you what to do if a kid has attention issues. So this will be just a plethora of idea of things you can try in the classroom that will help explicitly teach this and better understand how the child navigates these executive functioning skills and what to do about it.
So will it be like 10 executive functioning skills, or like where does your list come from? How is it organized?
Yeah, so I just go, read all about them, and yeah, there's probably going to be 8 to 10
Okay.
with maybe 10 ideas of things you can do in the classroom to help.
So cool. I think it is helpful to know, hearing from you, that there isn't like one place where one might go to find this list of skills. Because I think that's what I was looking for when I first heard this. Okay, what are the set of executive functioning skills? And to recognize that that doesn't exist. It's a body of research, and you can call anything an executive functioning skill if it makes sense in your classroom, and if it's a way that you're helping learners to become more regulated, present. It's the learning skills.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And,
Okay.
I mean, academics are important for sure. But if you can't pay attention and you can't get the work done, you see, so executive functioning really does have such a huge place and necessary. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because the two major audiences, when I was Googling around, like the two that came up were adults with ADHD
Yeah.
and early years children. And
Yes.
so, do you think, is the reason for that just Is it like what was missed in school and now we're seeing the other end as adults? You think that's where that audience has emerged from?
Well, it's funny because I was just talking to a dad the other day who was diagnosed very late in life,
Uh,
with ADHD, and he said his school experience was horrible because
yeah.
he was labeled as a bad kid, but really no one really showed him what it was like to pay attention and to get started, and then he just kind of gave up. I mean, why try if everything you do is wrong? Like sometimes we're going too fast for these kids, not only verbally, right? Because we are talking too fast. I always call it, when I coach teachers, I say, start to think about Mr. Rogers. Remember, he used to say, "Hi, welcome to my neighborhood." And you'd be like, "Come on, let's go a little faster." That's exactly the speed that kids understand, right?
Beautiful.
So we just need to slow down and give kids a chance to absorb what we say, or show visuals. Visuals are so important.
Picture says 1,000 words.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I love that. Hey, when you're teaching these skills, do you find it's helpful to embed them alongside academics, more of like a split screen model, or are you kind of teaching them separate? Like first we're working on executive functioning skills, then we're turning to academics. Like
Oh,
what is your
no,
approach?
you're integrating them all through your day, all through your day. I mean, you still have your curriculum to disseminate, and then, you can show these skills as a complete integration. And I think we need to. I mean, I think I think we're going to find that the addiction to social media and screens is going to hamstring an entire generation of children. And then we had COVID in the mix where we made kids go on screens, you know, 4 year olds. But it's just incredible. So this generation, I don't know, we really need to understand a little bit more about the brain science and what's happening. I mean, there's people in Silicon Valley that are paid big bucks to get your kid addicted to these games and, social media and things like that.
Well, to me, it begs the question, like, are our brains evolving and might school need to make big shifts to change like how we're experiencing and living in the world these days? Like it is a faster pace, and how do we best prepare our learners to jump into that kind of sea of flowing information?
I completely agree. I mean, there are some schools and not to chide them, but are back in the old 1950s and 60s model of the kids sit, teacher teaches in the front of the classroom. That's got to change. I mean, that really does. Kids need to be up and moving and active, and, you know, brain and body need to be connected.
Yes.
Yes,
I think that is what's so exciting about, I mean, like COVID was a major shift, to how we teach. And AI now is obviously bringing a major shift to how we teach. And it fills me with so much enthusiasm and optimism, actually, that a lot of what we've known about best practices in education has felt really difficult to implement. And my hope is that these kind of technologies and put the pressure on us to make these shifts.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Fingers crossed. Peggy, when you're teaching about executive functioning, do you find there are common misconceptions that arise or advice that really resonates with folks?
Well, right now, I kind of think it is not the buzzword, but it is. I
Yeah.
mean, people are really. We have so many kids that are labeled I like would say a 10 years behavior ago, problem or it wasn't ADD or it wasn't ADHD. really They talked can't be in about. my classroom. Well, So yes, they it's can. really And if you're to more using light with a
whole
visuals,
lot
take a
of
picture of me
bodies of
doing this.
research
This is what
about it and
I
how
look like
important it is
doing
to
what you're
integrate
asking
it
me
in
to
with
do.
academics. Clever.
To
Welcome
make
to Toddle
these
Schoolers
well-rounded
Project. On today's episode of the podcast, I'm joined
individuals.
by
And maybe
Peggy
it actually
Campbell-Rush,
is coming
and
from
we're talking
corporate
all about
America, where
executive functioning.
they're asking for
This is one of those buzzwords
new
that I'd heard a lot
employees to
about,
be able to
and I
get
wasn't
along,
quite sure
work
what it
in a
meant.
team,
So when we're
problem
talking
solve,
about
go back
executive
and try
functioning,
again.
we're really digging into the
Maybe we're
skills
starting to see
of
that trickle
learning.
down.
Peggy's great because she
Um,
gives so many actionable examples and strategies that you can take and use in your classroom tomorrow. And she really highlights this through line of transitioning away from anger and frustration at our students and towards curiosity and meeting them exactly where they are. So, without further ado, let's jump into this episode with Peggy Campbell-Rush. Those are really the essential skill sets.
Yes. And quite truthfully, you can Google information. You can get it on your watch. You can get it on your screen. You can get it via text message. I mean, like the information that you need is out there.
Right.
How do you put it into practice with others who you're working with on a team or in a classroom? How do you manage that? Because information is everywhere now.
Definitely. The School Leaders Project is brought to you by Toddle, your all-in-one teaching and learning platform made for teachers and by teachers. If you're doing the hard work of creating learning progressions and tracking skills, and you need an LMS that really meets you where you are, that helps you document the learning journey and communicate with families, all powered by AI, well, Toddle might just be the perfect fit. Check us out at toddleapp.com. Now, let's get back to this episode with Peggy Campbell-Rush. Do you find in your workshops with schools, is there an aha moment where people kind of go, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, or oh, that strategy really clicks with me? Like, is there something that you share that really like jives?
So again, I love to go back to chunking, and I love humor because humor and novelty, kids love that. I mean, they just glom onto it. So I'll say, okay, so we're going to work on first time listening today. So I'm going to say, I need everybody to look at me. And you're all going to look somewhere else in the classroom, right? So they all do that. And they're all like giggling and laughing and whatever. And we practice, I always practice everything before I do it. And I usually practice 3 times because I love the chunking. And then I'm going to say, okay, now I'm going to say, I need you to look at me. And you're going to kind of look at me, but maybe look behind me, right? And then for the 3rd time, I'm going to say, I need all eyes on me. And you're all going to be sitting up straight and you're going to look right at me. And of course, that show Family Feud.
Yeah.
But like somebody gives an answer and it doesn't matter what the answer is. And they're always like, good answer, good answer, good answer. And I kind of employ that of like, good job, good job, good job. Right.
Yeah.
So we try it novel, humor, approximation, getting there, doing it. You see how that looks? And it's fun and they remember it and it's impactful because it was fun and funny.
Right. Well,
Yes.
and it hits the nail on the head of so much of what we do as teachers are based in assumption. Like, oh, I assume my student should already know how to sit in a circle. I assume my student should already know that when I say this, this is what I mean. And when we just take that little step back and go, oh, I've noticed when I'm calling attention back that eyes are all over the place. Like how simple and easy it is to do that as a quick little mini lesson, but it takes that shift of the teacher of saying, I'm curious about this behavior and how might I?
Yes, I mean, you have nailed it. That's the Achilles heel of the whole thing is that some teachers are actually very angry or upset because they assume that these kids should already have that. And maybe back
Yes.
in the 60s and 70s they did because parents were stricter or whatever. I don't know. And they're like, well, I don't understand. By now, being like 2nd grade or 3rd grade, they should already know this. They should do it automatically. Well, if it's not happening, let's take a step back and do it in a humor way or a novel way and have fun with it and then expect it. You see, because when that's another reason that when I ask a class, and I can ask an assembly of 250, 300 kids for them to be quiet. I ask for quiet. I ask everybody to look at me, and then I ask for quiet. And I don't necessarily put my fingers up, but I will wait for 3 full seconds of quiet. Because what happens is that 2/3 of the kids will get quiet. 1/3 will probably be still talking to a neighbor or whatever. And then they hear the silence and they're like, whoa, what's happening? So it's startling, but kids don't hear quiet very much anymore. They're coming to school on a noisy bus or they're coming to school in a car where the radio or the video is playing. They don't really hear quiet too much. And once you employ quiet, you're going to find that it's very, very powerful.
So interesting. Oh, I would just love to be a fly in the wall in one of your classrooms, Peggy. So much of what you do, when you talk to experts, so much of what they do is just implicit and it's so natural and fluid. So it'd be great to kind of film you for a day and just see what emerges.
I do. I love teaching. I love working with kids. And, I will tell you, because we're talking to teachers, I employ this at parent conferences too. As a school administrator, I always say nobody's coming into my office to tell me I'm beautiful. They have a complaint, they have a problem they want me to solve. They're coming after me because they feel that something's going wrong.
Mm,
And I always tell administrators, don't go on the defensive because it puts that person in the driver's seat. I want you to just sit and let silence. Now, you don't put the fingers up, but I'm just demonstrating to you that I wait for full 3 seconds of quiet. And once I let quiet do the heavy lifting, I will tell you almost 99% of the time, I'll have a parent backtrack and be like, that came across just a little bit too harsh. I really didn't mean it quite that way. I'm just here to have you help me. And then boom, we're meeting in the middle. We're teaming up. Silence has a very, very powerful medium to get everybody on the same place.
mm. Well, and again, what you're capturing is it feels like you're modeling the skills of regulation. You're feeling yourself get a little reactive, and instead of responding right away, you're giving yourself that 3 seconds of pause. And what a beautiful model for self-regulatory practices that we should be doing as teachers, as school leaders, as anybody in the room.
Yeah. And I mean, we are consummate professionals. And when
Yeah.
someone challenges that, something that we do extremely well, of course we want to defend ourselves. But as soon as we go on the defensive, again, the dynamic of the power changes. And we can't have that. We know what we're doing. We're really good at what we're doing.
Love that. It's a quote I feel like I've come back to again and again this year. It's like, what is the difference between being reactive and handling something with creativity?
Oh, I
And
love that.
the
Yeah,
simple answer is it's the C, right? Between reactive and creative, it's just the letter C, which stands for curiosity. If we can keep curiosity as that central lens, I think that is so much of this work.
absolutely. And that comes with listening.
Oh,
Really listening, active listening rather than wanting to, jump in and solve the problem. Because a lot of people, I would say there's some people that don't want you to solve their problem. They just want you to listen to them.
yeah. We all just need some empathy sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. This question actually came from a member of the Academic Leaders Forum who attended your workshop. And she was really impressed with the activities for increasing attention and retention. And she says that you break it down into 3 sections that tasks should be divided into. Could you explain that a little bit?
Well, I think again, if we go into chunking, and I think the way I explained it in the workshop was, the first time you give directions, it's like you're going into your blank room and you're just kind of white walling the walls, just getting them ready, right? So that's the first direction. The
Mm,
second direction is kind of like, oh, well, I decided on a color of paint. Now I'm going to paint that. And the third time you're hearing it, it's like, okay, now I'm going to hang some pictures on the wall. Like I get the details. So if we have kids that really don't understand the first time, try the second time, have them repeat it back to you. Sometimes I do tactile, like I just gave you, 2 directions or 3 directions. Tell me what they are. Touch my finger as you say it. Let's do it again. And then often, especially with older kids, I say, now, if you had to teach somebody else, how would you say it to them? So
cool.
that puts ownership and them in the driver's seat. And then they get to re explain it. And I'm going to tell you, for attention and retention, it's very powerful.
Very cool. Okay, so just I think your threes come back again and again of just
Very much so.
and that's just because that's how the brain thinks well. It's just that chunking into three logical
Absolutely.
steps.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we do more than 3, we get overwhelmed.
Smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, really cool. Do you have any other authors you suggest in this space who are thinking and learning about really learning skills is what I would call them, or executive functioning?
Well, I will say that you just really need to just go on the internet. There's just almost too many to mention there.
Yeah.
There's books out there. Hopefully mine will come out soon.
Yeah. My honorable mention would be Guy Claxton. Have you checked out his work before, Guy
And
Claxton?
again?
Guy Claxton.
No, I haven't, but I'm writing it down right now.
So he has a really big body of research around the learning power approach that is just founded in the belief that learning is a learnable skill. And so much of what we're talking about
That's a
is
great
embedded
quote
in
right
his
there.
work. Yeah, he's really lovely. So yeah, if people are looking for more of that kind of that body of research and where to find it, that's a really cool framework. Any other
Yeah.
frameworks that you found? Like, I mean, 21st century skills kind of have some of this baked in, but are there other places where you turn to?
Huh. I think pretty much, a lot of the things that I do come from a grassroots need,
Yeah.
right? Like a teacher will come to me and be like, well, I'm looking at this kid and I don't know what to do. So then I'll go in and observe that child and to the teacher's interaction with that child, because
Mm,
there are sometimes when I, meet with the teacher after and, she or he will say, what do you think? And I'll be like, well, I know exactly who you really don't like. You see, sometimes kids know whether you're smiling from the nose down or the whole face,
right.
right? And we need, and I say this often, you don't really necessarily need to like a kid, but you need to love them.
Yeah.
You absolutely need to love them, and they need to know it. They need to know it.
It's so much of what being a teacher is that can't be captured in a set of standards or in a set of anything is that the love and the relationship and that sense of belonging and culture that you create by genuinely loving your kids. It's
Yeah, because whatever you're feeling is contagious. If I go into a classroom and I am upbeat and I can't wait, and I say to kids, oh my God, you're not going to believe this book I have to read to you today. It's so great. They're like, wow, okay, great. I can't wait. That's the enthusiasm that is contagious. And kids will, just eat that
eat
up,
it up. Yeah.
especially the ones who, let's say, suffer because they can't quite catch up or they don't have the working memory or whatever. They need a cheerleader. They
Right.
need it. They need it all through the day to say, you can do it.
So if I'm a school leader thinking about implementing executive function, trying to grow learning skills in my students, what should year one look like?
It would be getting the disseminators together. You're going to need the teachers that are seeing it day and day and really glaringly picking out, maybe, again, with chunking, maybe you want to have the top three things that your teachers are seeing are the ones that need to be worked on the most. Could be working memory, emotional control, and attention, right? I find that those three are ones that come up a lot. You get people together, you start to dialogue, you keep notes and keep track, you have data, you look at classrooms, and then, you move forward with a plan. But you have to have the practitioner in there. You see
Okay.
that? I really try to stay away as an administrator for top-down directives. They don't work. If I press somebody to do something that I want them to do and they're not fully engaged, they're not going to do it. No, they're not going to do it well.
So if you're looking for folks to kind of champion this, you're looking for those teachers who are confident with classroom management, who like are those kind of the what other are the flags of, oh, this is a person who I need to have on this committee.
Well, first of all, I usually do volunteers, and then
Okay.
I go out and I grab people that I know be really good on the committee. And there's a lot of people. I would say 60% of a faculty that will do the wait and see approach. I mean, to your point earlier, there's a lot of administrative turnover, right?
Right.
A tremendous amount. We have so many senior administrators in the last 5 years that have retired. Um, and we have a lot of new people. And so, because a lot of administrators will jump around, you got a lot of teachers going, okay, this is my fifth guy or fifth woman, in 7 years. I'm just going to wait it out because whatever change they make, they're going to take it with they go. So, yeah.
So you got to build
And
that buy-in of why does this matter? Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, you nailed that. The why matters tremendously.
And
And
what
when
would be the
and when you
why?
have and when you have the practitioner who says, I have a need, well, that's
Yeah.
the why. Yeah.
What's the biggest why for exploring executive function as a team? I'm sure that's kind of, I would guess that's where your book begins.
I'm sorry,
So,
say that again.
what is the why for executive function? If you're making a case for your team and trying to help them to understand, what's the biggest why behind it?
Yeah, it's what are you seeing in your students? What is derailing your lesson?
Mm,
And it's usually executive functioning skills. Well, the kids don't remember what I just said to them 2 minutes ago or 2 days ago. Or I can't get everybody to pay attention when I'm trying to do a lesson so that they can go off and do their task. So it's really the grassroots of what are you seeing and what is derailing your ability to teach well.
Cool. Katie Novak from Universal Design for Learning talks about the barriers to learning. And this seems like a beautiful lens for this work of what are the barriers to understanding, the barriers to engagement, the barriers to processing, and how do we teach those skills explicitly, those learning skills?
Yes, and rather than expecting them and getting, angry that these kids don't have the skills, it's going back down to the lowest level of success. I mean, sometimes it's like, hey, you walked in the door today.
You're here.
You remembered your backpack. Like, good job, good job. I mean, really, it's taking it in segments of what the child can do and celebrating them, and then maybe adding something on
Cool.
rather than saying, oh my God, you can't do the 12-step process of coming in, greeting me, unpacking your backpack, getting your folder out, putting your papers away, hanging up your backpack, getting your lunchbox out. Where's your water bottle? I mean, when you think about it, that's a lot to do in the morning.
Right.
Yeah. So having it in a vertical fashion with picture after picture after picture after picture, where all of your students are in there doing that 12-step process, you could just, rather than being like punitive, like, oh my God, where's your lunchbox? It would be like, hey, number 5. And they go over to the wall and there's a picture of the lunchbox. And they're like, oh yeah. And then they go over and do it. It makes it so much easier.
Right. So I think we come back to the same through line of just being curious. I'm noticing, it makes me curious. I wonder how I might scaffold that. And that might be a visual, that might be a mini lesson on what this looks like, that might be making an anchor chart, that might be making sentence stems. There's lots of creative ways we do this work, but it starts with that curiosity, recognition, and a desire to provide scaffolds and supports as opposed to just getting angry about it.
Yeah, I love your word scaffolding because that's exactly what it is. It's that incremental building up of skills. Yeah, that's perfect. A perfect word for it.
Love it. Oh, Peggy, this is so fun and just really affirming of, I think when we hear these new buzzwords, it can feel like this thing we're not doing and now we've got to add it on. And I hope so many teachers and leaders will listen to this episode and go, oh, I am doing that. And maybe this is my next step to take that a bit further. But I just think you made it feel really approachable and doable and natural into how we best teach. So I really, really appreciate that.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you for giving me grace.
Yeah, so fun.